Hi everyone, this is Samit. Welcome to Between the Lines. So today we're going to be talking about the Western media bias and also the bias of the activists, strategists, analysts from the West. When I say the West, let me define it. So the West means obviously the US and Europe, but it also kind of would include anybody from the West-leaning countries. So this is a really big pattern that has emerged. Obviously, India has had a topsy-turvy relationship with the West. So during the early part of our independence, say around 1950, 60, 70, we were leading the non-aligned movement. And now we are liberalized, we are much more interconnected with the world, but still, I think there is enough out there which causes us to be extremely cautious in our dealings with the West. And one of the reasons is that their commentary on India almost is either romanticizing India or is demonizing India. There's never a really realistic view. This is my view, and you could have a different view, but I'll give you an example. So there is this slumdog millionaire view, the view of India being poor, riven with caste and religious divisions, and so on. But there is this other view that India is this IT hub of really intelligent people. Then within that, there could be a view that India is this country of IT coolies. So there is a contradiction in the way the world perceives us. And one of the reasons is that we've not spent enough time, effort, money to set a certain narrative, a certain brand India. A branding is not an exercise in holding an event, say in Munich, and having a trade fair um, with Incredible India. It's really about a story that you tell the world, and that story has to be coherent, it has to be consistent, and it has to be told within the country before it's told outside. And today, what we see in India is really a clash of these two narratives: a narrative of what the West perceives us as, and what the current dispensation is trying to change that. Unfortunately, since this Modi 2 or Modi's victory in 2019, we've got this huge uh, public relations disaster ongoing. There are multiple reasons for it. Obviously, there are lobbies and vested interests that have been hurt by what India has done in Kashmir, what India would uh, is planning to do in terms of its trade policies or lack of free trade agreements. There's this whole talk about Indo-Pacific and India containing China and so on. So all of this talk is intermeshed with this extremely harsh view of India, taken especially by the global left. I call it harsh because they cherry pick certain events. A lot of times they distort these events, or they exclude some others that happened in consonance with them, and therefore they create a narrative of India being this really intolerant, fascist, Hindu extremist country, uh, which is really far from the truth. Because even if you asked a Hindu extremist what they want uh, to make happen in India, no one's going to say that, put Muslims in detention centers and pretty much do a genocide. If there are such people, then obviously they need to be condemned. But living in India, talking to so many people, I don't really see that. But some people from the Indian left also concur with this view. I'm sure there are billions of dollars riding their view, so they're not going to change it. So uh, what really needs to happen from the government side is a concerted effort to create a narrative, and obviously they need to create it in India first. And the first hurdle they have faced is the Indian media, especially the left leaning media. And the fundamental crux is that there is no discussion, and it starts from the very top. You see what happens in the parliament, it's my way or the highway. So the way the request is put forward, it's designed to get a reaction out of you. For instance, uh, the opposition wants a discussion on the riots and the virus, which is their right, and they have every right to demand it. The question is it okay for them to wait for a week, or is it okay to derail everything? So, why have they adopted this all or nothing approach? I don't remember uh, when the left liberals were in power that they encountered this kind of obstructionism from their opposition. If they did, I mean, I'll be happy to hear about it. But this is causing a major schism in the Indian polity, and we already see the results of it. For instance, on CAA and RC, the argument really is that, look, you could have given this citizenship to some people using the existing provisions. So why are you really doing this CAA? So there must be some plan to this or some game around this. And I suspect it's because that's how they think. So obviously, if every action of theirs is very well calibrated and thought through, and there's always a sequence to their statements and actions, then therefore they would always assume their opposition, which is the BJP, the NDA, is doing the same. Uh, the problem seems to be that uh, if the NDA was really thinking through all the steps, then we wouldn't have had such a large disruption in the last 3 months. They would have anticipated it. They would have thought through these steps in terms of the reaction. Even if they couldn't anticipate what happens in India, they could have anticipated what happens outside India, especially with certain countries looking out for opportunities to put India down. So I am a little surprised that the opposition takes this view that CAA was unnecessary given the current provisions of the constitution, and that because the CAA has been brought in, it must be that they are thinking about bringing in NRC. While that is a discussion for some other day, and I got derailed, uh, but there is a continuous demonization of Modi. It's a very careful, deliberate, consistent, ever deepening, ever widening demonization. Uh, the Modi government will do well to not get swayed by what the establishment is saying. Now, for instance, a lot of right wing people in India supported the Tories in the UK, and Boris Johnson won. But just yesterday or 2 days back, the UK Parliament has really criticized India on CAA and NRC, and it's important to understand that Boris Johnson is very soft on India. For him to go about doing this means that he's under immense pressure to do it. So there are a lot of lobbies going around. The question is that where do you want to counter this? How do you want to counter this? And what is going to change this around? Well, I don't have all the answers, but then uh, I'll give you an example how this is getting distorted. This has been reported, but I'll just put it out. So, for instance, this Intelligence Bureau fellow, Ankit Sharma, got killed in the recent Delhi riots, and lo and behold, Wall Street Journal carried an article which said, look, we spoke to his brother and he saw Hindutva mob, chanting Jai Shri Ram, basically attack him and kill him. And his brother has basically denied this. He said, I never said these words. And he said it on record. So how can a newspaper or a media organization as respected as WSJ, as large as widespread as it is, carry such a distortion? It's not even a distortion, it's a lie. And it's a very motivated lie. So that tells you exactly what is going on. Even on the detention centers, the first time we heard about these detention centers, and they don't exist by the way, except one or two in Assam, was in the Western media. And when I first read about them, I went scurrying to the Indian media, and the Indian media picked it up from the Western media. So, how is it that detention centers, if they are supposed to be a threat to Indian Muslims, was first picked up by the Western media, and it was picked up because there were a couple of U.S. Congress men and women who were basically propagating this lie. Now the question is that why were they doing it? Okay, fine, they have some constituents from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and so on, or some left-leaning ones. But why would you propagate a lie? I understand you have a different point of view and you want to put it forward, but why the lie? Or is it that they don't verify the facts, or are they just looking at them from a certain angle? So what is going on? And I think it'll be a good research item going forward, because India is going to face increasingly more caustic uh, media remarks. As more and more countries start criticizing India, more other countries would be obliged to join in. And at some point during this year, I am predicting that India would be under pressure of being sanctioned unless it reverses some of its policies. Now, given that state of affairs, and remember, a lot of things depend on how the US election goes and who wins there, whether Joe Biden wins or whether Donald Trump wins. I'm not expecting a Sanders win. If that wins, if that comes through, then this is going to be a very different discussion. Uh, Remember, there is part of the US establishment, the State Department, which really goes after India all the time. Doesn't matter whether it's Manmohan Singh or it's Modi or it's Narasimha Rao, it's peacetime or wartime, they go after India. And I wonder why. And one doesn't have to look, you don't need a PhD. They just want to contain you. And US always plays both sides. So they play India against China, Pakistan against India, Afghanistan against Pakistan, Afghanistan against Iran, Iran against Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia against Iran against Israel. So it's a very A B C. A fights B, B fights C, B also fights D. So it's a very nicely calibrated uh, foreign policy that the US has. The question is that what do you do with the outcome of it? The outcome of it is this media demonization that's going on, and it's not abating. Whatever you do, it only intensifies, and it is now catching fire in some places. It's like the coronavirus. Uh, you must have heard of the UNHRC filing the case in Supreme Court, to be heard as a amici curiae, as a friend of the court, which is, they're saying, oh, we do it in many places. Oh, okay. I think India should walk out of UNHRC, because why do we need one? Why do we need to be a part of it? If Pakistan persecutes Hindus, will UNHRC help us? Or will they do anything? Will they be effective? The answer we all know is no. So why pay lip service? Do what Trump did, walk out. Now remember, when it comes to the Indian media, there are these people who are caught in the radio tapes, and they're still around, and they still talk about the same things in the same tone, in the same way, 6 years into this regime, and one wonders what can change it. On Twitter, there is this lobby against the right wing. Um, Look, I am a nationalist. I'm reasonable when it comes to what the facts are. Uh, I'm not one-sided. So it is true that there are trolls on both sides, and some of the trolls on the right-wing side are pretty vicious. But we are really talking about the narrative. We're not talking about the noise. What you hear on the media, on some shows, and a lot of the popular aspects of this narrative is the noise. But what's going on behind it? Now, look at China. What China did long back, many years back, was they cut out Google, they cut out Facebook, they cut out Twitter. They have their own applications, and when you think about it, this is a great move. And then so they are aware of what's going on, so they don't expect the American side to really reconcile. They don't expect good coverage by the Americans or the Western media at all. They know that they are going to be under pressure. So they've got an action out there. Now, what are the policy options for India? Uh, I think for India, you'll have to do a bit of a mix. So you probably need a product mix which is going to challenge the Facebooks and the Twitters, at least in India. And then you need a slow and steady pressure on them uh, to correct. I mean, it's okay if you're left leaning, but at least report the facts. Don't distort them. Don't stop anyone, even a left winger, from propagating their views. Stick to the facts. Uh, so let's see how these things go. I'll come back to you with a more in depth analysis of this. So I have worked with, or rather collaborated with Rajiv Malhotra long back for a couple of events. So he has uncovered this whole Break India movement, and his book came out in 2010. So this is in consonance with that. But then that, how do you intertwine this media movement with those aspects is something I will cover. And I think we need to take a very practical view, uh, but also a conceptual long-term strategic view. So I think the government right now is just trying to wriggle out of a bad situation, and they're not really able to, except they're not falling under. And I think that's good enough for now. But will it be good enough later? Time will tell. So thank you. Thank you for watching. Talk to you again. Bye bye.